you joining virtually. Our chief guest, Hon'ble Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Shri Narendra Singh Tomar, is with us now. And on behalf of NITI Aayog and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, a very warm welcome. And I'd request the Honorable Minister to please join us on the stage. Yes, all right, yes. And a warm welcome to Professor Ramesh Chand, member NITI Aayog, who is also the chairperson of the steering committee of the National Dialogue, which has resulted in the book that is to be released today. May we also invite on stage Dr. Pramod Joshi, the President, Agriculture Economics Research Association. Yes. Former FAO representative in India, Mr. Shyam Khadka. Former representative in India, Mr. Tomyo Shichiri. We are also expecting the Chief Executive Officer of NITI Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant, who is on the way. May I also welcome Ms. Nupur Singh, the Senior Editor, Springer Publications, onto the stage, please. May I request my colleague to pass on the plant that Professor Chand would offer to the Minister. This one.
Green welcome, sir.
May I now invite Dr. Kondar Chava, the officer in charge FAO in India, to make the formal welcome. Thank you.
Namaskar. Good evening and a very warm welcome. On behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization and NITI Aayog, I wish to welcome Honorable Minister for Agriculture and Farmers Welfare and the chief guest for the book launch, Shri Narendra Singh Tomar ji. Also, I wish to welcome Honorable Member of NITI Aayog, Shri Ramesh Chand ji. The respected CEO of NITI Aayog, Shri Amitabh Kant ji, will be joining shortly. Former FAO representative, Mr. Shyam Khadka, former FAO representative, Mr. Tomyo Shichiri, respected Dr. Pramod Joshi, Ms. Nupur Singh, and respected members of the steering committee of the National Dialogue, all our esteemed guests present here today and those attending virtually, and particularly members from the electronic and print media who will help us to carry the key messages of the book outside this room. FAO is particularly thankful to NITI Aayog and the Government of India for the keen interest and kind support for the entire national dialogue process, which has finally led to the publishing of this book, which is being released today. I also wish to take this opportunity to commend the commitment of the two former FAO India representatives in this journey. Their continued support and presence today speaks to the commitment of the FAO team to stay on course and deliver the product even beyond their tenure. Thank you. The National Dialogue of Indian Agriculture towards 2030 commenced 2 years ago. Since then, a steering committee and a set of highly respected thinkers and practitioners have authored the diverse pathways for India's agriculture towards 2030. These were opened for comments, and in fact, many of you also participated in the virtual conference which was held in January 2021. The feedback from those conversations were incorporated and collated into the chapters that form this volume. Your being here in itself signifies your commitment to a dialogue, which the book attempts to take forward. Thank you. Namaskar.
May I now invite Ms. Nupur Singh, Senior Editor, Springer, to speak about the book availability and accessibility. Thank you, Nupur.
On behalf of Springer, I would like to wish each and every one of you a very good evening, especially to the distinguished panel, dignitaries and guests over here, all those who have graced this occasion and given their precious time for today evening, and all those who are joining online as well. Secondly, I would like to thank FAO and NITI Aayog for this opportunity to collaborate on this very important book, which is so very relevant for determining the future of one of the most important parts, important sectors of India agriculture. And it is also a great addition to Springer's own SDG collection, and I hope to do one which kind of addresses the gender aspect in agriculture, as I can see that I'm probably the only person over here who's kind of trying to balance the gender aspect on the panel over here. So the fact that this is open access is also great, and it's the cherry on the cake, and I hope each and every one of the readers will try and access it and make use of the excellent research that is being provided through this book. I'll take just a few minutes of you about Springer, which is a pathbreaker in open access publications. And we started open access with journals in 2010, but soon went on to books because there was this great demand from researchers that books should be made open access as well. And I'm very happy to say that we have been publishing over the years a lot from Asia. Of course, Japan and China take the lead, but India is the leader from South Asia. So I'm hopeful that soon we'll overtake maybe other regions and publish many more open access works so that our own research from this region can reach a much more wider and larger audience. So the difference in open access publication from the other publications is visibility. So the open access volumes are visible on Amazon, Google Books, Apple iBooks, Open Libraries, and Directory of Open Access Books. And as a result of that, the open access chapters in books receive 10 times more downloads, 2.5 times more citations, and 10 times more online mentions than regular books that are being published through scholarly publications. And of course, which is what is most important, that it reaches a geographically diverse readership, which is 61% more countries than a regular book reaches out to. So coming to this particular volume, we first started discussing this in this last year, and I have to thank Shalini for all the help that I have got. Without the coordination that I received from FAO, this book would not have been possible in the time that it has been. And without taking much of your time and keeping you from the excellent discussions forward, I would like to mention that the book is available on Springer Link. It is, you can access it, download it, check it for metrics, who are reading it, where is it available. And for any other questions about it, please feel free to contact me. I'm available. Thank you.
Thank you, Nupur. We'd like to take this moment to also welcome Mr. Amitabh Kant, the Chief Executive Officer of NITI Aayog, who has just joined us. Ananya, if you could please hand over the welcome plant to Professor Chand. may I please invite Professor Ramesh Chand, member NITI Aayog, and the chairperson of the steering committee of the National Dialogue, to please give his opening remarks.
Honorable Shri Narendra Singh Tomar ji, Minister of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare, Government of India, CEO NITI Aayog, Shri Amitabh Kant ji, former FAO representative in India, Shri Shishri Tomyo-san, Shri Shyam Khadka ji, another former FAO representative in India, Dr. P.K. Joshi ji, Madam Nupur Singh, honorable members of steering committee, Professor R.B. Singh and others, senior officials, paper writers, and participants in this important meeting, and representative of press and media. It is a really great occasion for me today that our effort of last 2.5 years has finally come to fruition, and we are able to give an output and outcome which, to be honest with you, exceeds my expectation. This could happen because of teamwork, the team in FAO under guidance of Tomyo-san, members of steering committee, and also my colleague in NITI Aayog, and also some formalities have to be done to make it a joint output. Shri Amitabh Kant ji, who always take a positive view of things, he extended his full support to have it as a first joint dialogue, then this joint publication, then today this joint launch, and subsequently joint policy briefs from this work. Thank you, Amitabh ji. As you all know that India has a lot of stories related to development, rich stories. Some are success stories, some are not so successful stories. Our economic survey of year 2012-13 recognize that Indian agriculture and green revolution is one of the most laudable success story of India. That gave a lot of satisfaction to those who were behind this green revolution, and I think it was based on the fact that in a sector like agriculture, where biological production is involved, the average growth rate during the 4 decades, beginning from 81 to 2021, has been more than 3%. It was only 1 decade when this growth rate went below 2.5%. In the other decades, it remained above 3%, and during the recent decade, it has further accelerated. And this happened despite the fact that environment is becoming hostile. There are all predictions about climate change and rise in temperature bringing down yield by X%. But I find that agriculture system of India has defied all those adverse situations, and it is continuing on its upward journey. There are numerous positive effects of this success and growth, reduction in poverty, reduction in hunger, socio-economic transformation, which already happened in some states, and many other states are in the process of experiencing it. But there have been some critics also who have been pointing out to some of the negative consequences. I just share you some story with you that some time back I was to deliver address in a seminar in Punjabi University, Patiala in Punjab, which is cradle of Green Revolution. and where there are books written on the socio-economic transformation brought by Green Revolution. But there were some people who wanted to raise that Green Revolution has spoiled everything, all those things. They were talking like this very, very, in a very articulate manner. So I just told them that, there is one very popular Punjabi song. If they look at it and its popularity, probably they would rethink their criticism of Green Revolution. तो मंत्री जी वो गीत है कि गड्डियां तो गड्डियां चलाउण लग गए पुत जट्टां दे ने गबरू. I translate it. Its meaning is that sons of farmers who were driving bullock carts are now driving motor cars. And today, if you count in Punjab villages what is number of cars, it is more than what was the number of bullock carts when Green Revolution started. So that is the kind of transformation, will full harnessing of Green Revolution, which is possible in the other states also. So having talked about positive side of Green Revolution, and 2 days back, new record established, $50 billion export of agriculture sector. Again, in itself is a, I think, something to be cherished. But as it usually happens, success never comes without cost. Success has its own cost. Success also brings its own challenges. And success also offers experience, and success also raises expectation and aspirations. So, what are the costs? There are fiscal costs, there are environmental costs, there are natural resource costs, there are health costs. Broadly, all costs related to Green Revolution, I think they can be subsumed under these 4 categories. The material in this book talk about all these costs, that how fiscal cost is rising, growth is turning costly, it has to be heavily supported, real cost of production is rising. So if that is the situation, either market need to pay higher price for the produce or government need to pay. Otherwise, growth will be affected. That is what we are experiencing now. And that has implication for fiscal stability, for consumer, for exchequer, and competitiveness. So this is one aspect which we need to address as we move into future. Environmental costs are well known. Imbalance between organic and inorganic fertilizer is well known. In early 70s, we used cow dung or organic manure 4 times the fertilizer use. But today, the equation has reversed. We are using 3.8 times the amount of nutrient which we are drawing from this cow dung. In other words, the use of chemical fertilizer in agriculture has increased at 7 times the growth rate in use of organic products. So obviously there are some imbalances and effect on natural system, on agriculture. Also, effect on groundwater, that there is a decline in 36% of blocks. Groundwater is witnessing decline. And over time, we are able to increase productivity of land, but we are not able to increase productivity of water. Even if it has increased, in some state it has increased at a very, very slow rate. So that's why when we say we have 18% population, 4% land, and only 2.4% of water and 4% of water and 2.4% of land, I tell some people that if I use this logic, then the scarcity and stress on land should be much more than what is on water. But we are not feeling that because we have been producing more and more water per, say, acre of land, but we have been producing less and less food per gallon of water. So water productivity is one big issue. And another thing is our policy that our share in global agriculture export is 2 to 3%, depending upon how you define agriculture and food. And US share is 15%. But the embedded water or virtual water that we are exporting is much more than what is the virtual water in the export of USA. And we have earned this, I would say, notorious distinction of being the highest exporter of embedded water in the world, despite being a water-stressed and water-scarce countries. Also, our trade pattern, because of technology also, no time to elaborate all those things, but I just want to bring it to the kind attention of Honorable Minister that we are exporting water-intensive crops, rice and sugarcane, and we are importing less water-consuming and nature-friendly crops, which is edible oil, oil seeds, and pulses. So that also this distortion is there. Then we have health costs, which are well known. I should be taking too much of time. But then there are challenges. The challenges are that if we look at our achievement in agriculture growth, that per capita food production has doubled. Now our food production is growing at 50% higher rate than population growth rate. But these achievements are not reflected in health outcome. Anemia is rising in 7-8 states. You look at health indicators, they are not good. They are not. They deserve better treatment. So these are also the aspects or contradiction which are addressed in this book. Then another challenge is that there are serious imbalances between demand and supply. And also our production choices are not consistent with the agroclimatic conditions. They are the challenges which need to be addressed. Then I come to expectation, because this is the context which was at the back of our head when we planned for this book, so important to share with you. If we look at expectation, it is human nature that when your income increase, your expectation, your lifestyle generally used to increase at a higher rate than what is increase in income. So with increase in income, agriculture income, which have been increasing, it may not be increasing at the rate one would expect, but they are definitely increasing, 3 to 4%. That was the kind of growth, sometimes 5% also. But the expectation and aspiration on living standard which were rising, they require growth in income to be something, say 6% or 7%. So this is one mismatch which happened. And then people, when development happens, are expected to move out of agriculture to industrial jobs, service sector job, but there the growth rate in job is slowing down. Industry is going for more capital intensive production. So that again put additional responsibility on agriculture that what we were expecting from non-agriculture. There we are not getting that much results, so we need to look back on agriculture on that. Particularly COVID-19 period, the shift of labor force from agriculture which was happening, that got reversed. So first time after so many years, nearly 21 years, the percent share of workforce engaged in agriculture is showing sign of increase. Then there are lessons. This is the last in the background, that lessons, as we have a shloka that Bhavishya atit ki कोख से जन्म लेता है, that whatever happened in the past, that is very important to keep in mind to charter our future. So taking cognizance of the past. So when Tomio-san and Mr. Shaba visited me in 2019, late 2019, with this idea of organizing a policy dialogue. So we were just thinking whether it should be Indian agriculture toward 2030 or Indian agriculture toward 2050. So then we just discussed it, that our first Prime Minister said that everything else can wait, but not agriculture. I would not comment on whether he followed it or not. What I told them, that at least we should follow it. agriculture can't wait. So if we keep it to 2050, then nobody will take responsibility. The government may feel, present government, that it is up to 2050, so we don't have to do much. There is sufficient time for people who will be there in the future. So I suggested that let us keep it short to medium term and only 2030, because problem of agriculture require short-term response, at best medium term. So agriculture is one subject where what Lord Kane said apply more aptly, that in the long run we are all dead. So we need to take action in the short term and medium term. So with that idea, we approached peer like Dr. R.B. Singh, Dr. Prodha, Mr. Malik, some members of steering committee are there, Dalwai ji, and we put some raw ideas before them. So they helped us in refining it, and finally we settled that we will have chapters on 8 sub-theme under the broad theme of Indian agriculture toward 2050. Shalini ji? Time तो नहीं मैं बहुत exceed कर रहा हूँ exceed. Okay. So then but I wanted to talk something about this book, what Dr. Joshi will talk about it. I will only say that all the authors, they gave their best to us. They put their lifetime intellectual capital in the chapters which they have written for us. And it is not a theoretical book, and it is not the book which only explain what is happening. It just suggests how to change it, because need now is not to explain only, but also to change it. I will take only one sample, though I had taken 8 samples, one from each chapter, but due to paucity of time, I will just take that first chapter. When I read, I found what is the message from this for policymaker, for Shri Tomar ji, Ministry of Agriculture, NITI Aayog, what is the message. So that book, that first chapter by Ashok Gulati and Ritika, just put so many graphs, but one graph is on what is the production of cotton. So it just says that between 2001 to 2004, 3-year average, and 2013, the production of cotton in India increased by 300%. And after that, it did not increase. 7 years, it did not increase. Last year, some increase, but you don't see any, there's a stagnation. So very clear message for technology that if you ignore what some ill-informed activist may be saying, and you take proactively a decision which is favorable towards technology, you can revolutionize production of commodities. And if you just for some reason dither on further decision on technology, then also you face the consequences. The things don't move. They just stagnate at that level. So I think that important movement has come even now in agriculture. And I'm especially mentioning this because last some meetings where Honorable Minister was there, I also was there, this debate on genetically engineered crops. So under his leadership, Ministry of Agriculture has worked very hard to develop consensus on this, and I think some positive news is expected very soon. Maybe Minister Saab can throw more light on this. So if we take those kind of decision, that is what is needed. Otherwise, every technology, every policy, it has both the sides. So this is just one message. Like this, there are a series of messages from every chapter and for this policy. So I would only hope that this book will be read with interest by all the stakeholders. And I hope it will create evidence-based support and public opinion to rise above narrow and short-term goals and shape policies for bright agriculture future of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chand. May I now request Mr. Tomyo Shichiri, former FAO representative of India, to please address the gathering and speak about the national dialogue.
Namaste. Honorable Union Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, and chief guest of this book launch, Shri Narendra Singh Tomarji, Honorable Member of the NITI Aayog, Professor Ramesh Chandji, respected CEO NITI Aayog, Shri Amitabh Kanji, former Secretary Agriculture, Shri Ashish Bafgunaji, former FAO representative for India, Mr. Shyam Kadka, respected Dr. Pramod Joshi, and all members steering committee of the National Dialogue, all distinguished guests present in this event, friends watching from wherever they are in India, and members from the electronic and print medias, and all my former colleagues at FAO India. Good evening. I am very grateful for your esteemed presence and the support our collaborators and you all give for this endeavor to the FAO team. Since my earlier days at FAO representative India, I am being honored to be associated with the National Dialogue on Indian Agriculture Toward 2030 that we had the privilege co-developed with the NITI Aayog and Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare of the government of the India. We started working on this almost 2 years ago. I did 18 with a steering committee that embodies expertise and experience. I take this opportunity to thank each and every members of the steering committee for association 2019 onward across 8 steering committee meetings, as well as endless email and phone calls. Your guidance has brought to us this point where we can share important output. An open access book for wider audience, and a set of policy brief for the relevant government agencies with recommendation as possible pathway for the road ahead toward 2030. Today's event celebrates the book and all those who made it possible. It is said that if there is a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. This book is about how we envisioned India's agriculture toward 2030. Thank you for those who made it possible for us to write it. What make it special is that it was written together. It emerged from the collective process with some of the best minds on agri-food system in the countries. I would particularly like to thank 3 editors, Professor Ramesh Chandji, Dr. Pramod Joshi, and Mr. Shyam Kadka, for also undertaking the technical review of the content generated in the dialogue. I also thank the esteemed authors of the various chapters of the book. Additionally, I wish to thank our FAO India team. I am particularly happy to visit India for the successful completion of the National Dialogue. With the 2 outputs, I foresee that the dialogue continue in a different shape and forms. I wish all those in this journey all the very best. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Tomio-san. May I now invite Dr. Pramod Joshi, the President, Agricultural Economics Research Association, and also a member of the Steering Committee of the National Dialogue, to please speak about the book contents.
Thank you very much. Namaskar and good evening to everyone. Honorable Union Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Shri Narendra Singh Tomarji, Professor Ramesh Chandji, member of NITI Aayog and co-editor of the book, CEO of NITI Aayog, Shri Amitabh Kanji, FAO India Officer in Charge, Dr. Konda, former FAO India representative, Mr. Tomio Shichiri, Dr. Shyam Khatka, co-editor of the book and former representative FAO India, Ms. Nupur from Springer, Salniji, members of the steering committee, esteemed authors and panelists, distinguished delegates, Team FAO, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to give you a brief flavor of the book, which is Indian Agriculture Towards 2030, Pathways for Enhancing Farmers' Income, Nutritional Security, and Sustainable Food and Farming Systems. As mentioned earlier, the book is the outcome of the National Dialogue organized last year. The book is forwarded by Honorable Vice President of India. In his forwarding note, which is very encouraging, he has mentioned that the book contains a wealth of information and a lot of new ideas, as well as insights on agriculture and farmers' welfare. He further mentioned that the book distills important lessons and present an array of policies for the government to choose. He felt that the book will be useful in deepening our collective understanding of different facets of sector that has immense potential and formidable challenges. The book contains 10 chapters, which are contributed by renowned professionals who are leaders in their own rights. In fact, the book is a success story of Indian agriculture and giving a way forward till 2030 and beyond. The book starts with the global and national challenges faced by Indian agriculture. It also provides India's commitment to SDGs and climate change and calls for a transformative vision. The book has shown how agricultural production system is transforming from cereal-based to high-value agriculture. Agricultural diversification, agricultural commercialization, modernization, and digital agriculture are the pillars of new agriculture. Similar to production system, the dietary patterns are also transforming from carbohydrate-based food to more nutritive and protein-rich food, but also showing rising fat intake. However, nutrition and health indicators are not improving the way the production system is transforming. The book contains chapters on key challenges Indian agriculture is facing. The foremost challenge is the climate change and its impact on agricultural production and farmers' incomes. The chapter proposes strategies to adapt and mitigate climate change. The other important challenge is increasing scarcity of water, especially groundwater. The book shows how defective policies are continuously deteriorating the groundwater in different parts of the country. Another important challenge to agriculture sector is growing incidence of pests, pandemics, and biosecurity. The serious concern is emergence of new diseases and pests, which are adversely affecting agricultural production. The transboundary diseases are threat to biosecurity and must be addressed jointly by all the countries. The book also provides alternative farming systems for transformative and sustainable agroecology and biodiverse future. Role of science, technology, and innovation is the foundation for a sustainable and resilient agriculture. The chapter advocates for higher allocation of funding to agriculture research and innovation. The chapter alludes the expansion of frontier and digital technologies for transformation of Indian agriculture. Similarly, role of structural reforms and governance are critical for agriculture. Role of price policies, market reforms, and institutions are being highlighted for an efficient, inclusive, and sustainable agriculture. Finally, the book provides pathways for transformation and emphasizes on remandating Indian agriculture. My co-author, Dr. Shyam Khatka, the co-editor of the book, will now provide the pathways and policies prescribed in the book. Thank you very much.
Maybe now welcome Mr. Shyam Khadka, former FAO representative in India, to continue about the book.
Thank you, Shalini ji. Honorable Union Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Sri Narendra Tomar ji. Honorable Dr. Ramesh Chand, member NITI Aayog and co-editor of the book. Respectable Amitabh Kant, CEO of NITI Aayog. Dr. Konda, FAO officer in charge. Mr. Tomio Shichiri, my successor and FAO representative. Dr. Pramod Joshi, who is the co-editor of the book. Respectable member of the steering committee, who have really contributed immensely to come to this level. Esteemed author and panelists who have made their own contribution. Ms. Nupur from Springer for publishing the book. Distinguished delegates, Team FAO, ladies and gentlemen. Having heard to Ramesh ji and Pramod ji, I don't think I have to say anything about the state of Indian agriculture. Basically, Indian agriculture's performance has been spectacular. I mean, last 60 years, if you compare 1965 to 2021, Indian agriculture's performance is nothing less than spectacular. But having said that, it's also important, Ramesh ji highlighted a number of areas where imbalances have cropped up. And we have not had full success in reducing rural poverty, especially rural poverty, undernourishment, micronutrient deficiencies. These have become still common. This is problematic to us at the moment. So given the situation, the success, big success on one hand, but in the meantime, the concerns that the second generation problems that we're encountering now has come through. On that, the last chapter of the book really is dedicated to set up a pathways. What are the pathways? What is it that we need to do for that? And in doing the pathway, because there are numerous, I'll read it to you because I cannot remember everything. So the idea is to make Indian agriculture more productive, more efficient, resilient, resource conserving, nutrition centered, and globally focused. So these are the adjectives around which we want Indian agriculture to go in the future. And on that, there are 7 pathways. I'll quickly go for the sake of time. I'll quickly move through. The first one is, very unfortunately, the Indian agriculture, the investment in Indian agriculture has been going down in recent years. And particularly, if you look at the corporate investment in agriculture, it's minuscule, especially corporate sector not coming to agriculture has been very problematic because then the agriculture is underinvested and resource crunch is what it is facing. To that, there are a few issues. One, of course, Honorable Minister's presence is there. Ramesh ji is here. At those two high level, my submission is that the policy environment has to be, one, corrected to some extent and has to be made very stable. Of course, our policy has been focused much more on protecting the urban consumers, and that gives the policy on unsuitability in a number of circumstances. So that is the first thing. And the such investments go on research and development. India does not spend enough in the research and development. There is a long paper that the book has on science, technology, and innovations. There's a lot of options that we have, the authors have worked out, and then that is where we can work out. And Secondly, especially my request to Honorable Minister here, to me, who has been working for Indian agriculture in the last 40 years, the Indian agriculture is very, very heavily, the policymakers are very heavily oriented towards self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency in wheat and rice. Those two crops and self-sufficiency, that has become 90% of our driving force in agriculture, and that is something that we need to kind of think through. One, the value of horticultural product today is more than the value of cereal grains that the country produces. Secondly, Indian agriculture actually has enough muscle to be integrated to global agriculture, and to me, who has seen from FAO's angle of the global agriculture, Indian agriculture can actually leverage global agriculture much better than the global agriculture can leverage Indian agriculture. That is the basic understanding that we have to see. Ramesh ji also mentioned that we don't process products very much. Our share of export, global export is very limited. So that is globally focused agriculture is something that we need to do. But before doing that, I want to repeat again, Your Excellency, Sir Minister, that the preoccupation with self-sufficiency is not something that should sort of bother us in the longer term. That's my second point. Actually, it's the book's second point, not my second point. The third thing that we would like to see is that there is a resource. Ramesh ji has made it very clear. There is the cost in terms of natural resource has been very high with the green revolution that we did, especially the overexploitation of water, which is not always a renewable resource, is problematic. And there is a whole bunch of areas that we need to work on this. So the natural resource management, improving on it is something that we need to work very hard on that. There is a lot of technological options available, but more than the technological options, there are institutional reforms that we have to do. The free electricity, the water costing nothing for agriculture, and majority of, almost over 80% Indian water going for agriculture. These are problematic. And Ramesh ji said very, very succinctly that actually, we are exporting so much of water in the form of rice that it's become problematic. That's the third point I would like to bring to your attention. That is part of the book. And the fourth one is the climate change is hitting us. And climate change is, it's no denying of the fact that climate change is affecting Indian agriculture. One quick calculation shows that India is one of the countries where the production impact will be negative, will be very high. Australia has high negative impact, about 17%, but Indian agriculture will be hit by almost 25% in terms of yield. So it's problematic. We need to deal with that. And on that, there is a lot of technological options. There are a lot of institutional options. Many of the options are no regret type. So if you engage, they will definitely benefit. We need to engage on that. That is the fifth point that I would like to bring to your attention. And the next one I would like to come to you is that the issue of nutrition and food is very important in India. Despite huge amount of buffer stock that we maintain, 190 million people go undernourished, or almost 200 people are below poverty line. So basically, this juxtapose those two facts: India's ability to really feed not only India, even rest of the world, but India's ability not to, be able to take those grains to the poor people who need those things. Those contradictions cannot go forever. So basically, that is one area that we need to work on. The diet over time has become narrower in India, so we should need to diversify the diet. Post-harvest losses are still very high. That is something that has to be encouraged. Biofortification is coming out as one of the good areas where we need to work on. Empowering women is yet another. Enforcing food safety standards. India has a very competent food standard institute, but in the meantime, enforcing all those things in the longer term are very important. And basically, exploiting groundwater, the regulatory environment is not very conducive. We need to work on it. It's not an easy decision. In every country, controlling the farmer's behavior is the most difficult thing to do, but nevertheless, we need to, this is something that the country has to get engaged. And finally, it's a question about governance. How do we govern the whole sector? There's a whole book on that, structural reforms and governance system. And the authors have said that, well, the minimum support price, the farmers actually doesn't get the minimum support price. There's still an intermediary involvement to that. Even if the minimum support price is given in full, there is distortive. Indian prices are already higher than the global prices. So, we being able to export the wheat to the rest of the world doesn't exist because we are not price competitive. Our resource use is inefficient. So resource use efficiency has to go up, especially the water use efficiency in India is very, very low. That has to really go up very high. Soil degradation rate is very, very high. We need to work on that. So, and then one area where we have not succeeded is that agriculture has become feminized. Women's empowerment and participation is very important. That is one area the institution we have not been able to work very, very well on that. And then the extension service has been affected by that also. Extension service is male-dominated, farmers are female-dominated, and the matching between the two has not been very good. And finally, some institutional reforms like contract farming is something that we have to do because the holding size is very small. So we need to bring some economies of scale in our operation. So these are the 7 points. The authors have done it, and Pramodji and my job has been to synthesize this thing and put it as the last chapter. But I must tell you very honestly that what Pramodji said or I said is utterly inadequate in terms of what the book contains. If you see the book, this is not a very big book. This is a heavily, very dense book with huge amount of information and analytics. So please forgive Pramodji and us, and to some extent Rameshji also, for giving just some of the highlights of the things, but we urge you to kindly go through the book. It has far, far more than what we have said. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at that moment in the evening when the book is going to be released. May we request the Honorable Union Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Shri Tomarji, to please formally release the book. Thank you. May I now request Mr. Amitabh Kant, the Chief Executive Officer of NITI Aayog, to make his remarks.
Honorable Minister Shri Narendra Tomarji, Honorable Member NITI Aayog, Mr. Professor Ramesh Chand, Tomio-san, Ms. Nupur Singh, Dr. Pramod Joshi, Mr. Shyam Khadka, distinguished guests, all the authors of various chapters in this book, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm truly delighted at this book because this book is actually a policy book. And policy priorities in agriculture are very critical because 43% of our labor force and our rural economy and consumption demand is still dependent on agriculture. While we continue to face many challenges of low productivity, low efficiency, climate change has emerged as a new challenge that we have to now contend with. We are all aware that our need is really to enhance productivity, increase efficiency, ensure sustainability, better manage water, but one of the major contents of the book is about availability of nutritious food and ensuring remunerative prices for farmers. And these are all massive challenges that the book provides many answers to. This publication comes at a very, very important time. And it comes at an important time because we have a very small window to mainstream climate change adaptation in Indian agriculture. And this book is important because it covers 8 very major thematic areas. They are all spelt out, including structural reform, sustainable and resilient agriculture, nutritive food, climate crisis, many key areas, water usage, all these are very key areas. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of this book is that it is completely forward-looking and it is progressive. Normally, books on agriculture are busy reviewing past trends and development all the time. And I've read many books on agriculture. They're all reviewing past policies. And therefore, in this book, very succinct policy ideas and suggestions have been put forward. And they actually require a huge amount of debate. And therefore, in my view, this book is a must-read for all those interested, not merely in agriculture and rural economy, but for all those who want growth and progress in India. Because agriculture is, to my mind, key, and it requires very progressive thinking. And not just agriculture, but the focus of this book on nutrition actually greatly enriches the debate and brings out the interconnected nature of these issues. And I can go on about the book because Professor Ramesh Chand makes a very strong case for a transformative vision of Indian agriculture, the challenge of climate change. He brings out issues of declining soil health. The chapter on managing climate risk in agriculture quantifies the impact of climate change on agriculture, livestock and fisheries. And I've been a long-term believer that we need to move away from wheat and rice to fruit and vegetables, to livestock, to fisheries, if you want to bring greater incomes to our farmers. And therefore, what kind of an impact will it make on all these areas? And the important thing is this chapter, there's a huge focus on technological options for climate smart agriculture. And the only way to make a paradigm shift is to use technology to leapfrog. Much like what UPI has done for digital payments, you need a platform approach where private sector can use this platform to bring in. There's a huge amount of data in agriculture, spread in silos all over. You need all this data to be put together so that our young entrepreneurs, our startups can use this data to technologically leapfrog. Therefore, technology has the potential to address many of the challenges in productivity and efficiency. And much like we are doing what we've done through the JAM Trinity, what we've done through biometrics, or what we've done through UPI, we need to bring in the use of technology in a very big way so that access to credit can be enhanced through leveraging technology. Today, many of our startups are innovating in this field, and precision agriculture, data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, genomics are just some of the areas where big gains can be made. There's a very, very major chapter, critical chapter on water management by Mihir Shah and Vijay Shankar, and which outlines the paradigm shift needed in water management. If the country is consuming 90% of its water on agriculture, and if we are exporting virtual water, as Dr. Ramesh Chand said, there is a serious challenge of demand-side management. Rather than simply focusing on supply of water, there's a huge need for participatory groundwater management, and there's a need to address the issue of groundwater extraction. Because we've reached a level where we are not taking out merely water from water extraction, but we are spreading cancer. And therefore, there's a need to look at the water energy nexus and tackle this issue in a very urgent, very critical, and in a very holistic manner. I don't want to speak much because much has been spoken about the book, but I would say that it's a remarkable book. It's a must read. It's path-breaking in many ways. And I would like to compliment all the authors. And I would like to merely say that all the recommendations in this book need to be taken forward for implementation, because agriculture is crying for radical change, and I think this book brings out the need for radical implementation on ground by bringing consensus all around. Thank you very much. My congratulations to Professor Ramesh Chand and all the authors. Thank you.
थैंक यू मिस्टर कांत. अब हम माननीय महोदय मंत्री जी से अनुरोध करेंगे कि वो सभा को संबोधित करें. धन्यवाद.
नीति आयोग और FAO के संयुक्त तत्वाधान में राष्ट्रीय संवाद भारतीय कृषि 2030 के इस कार्यक्रम में हम सब के मध्य उपस्थित श्रीमान अमिताभ कांत जी, डॉक्टर रमेश चांद साहब, टोमियो जी, श्याम जी, जोशी जी, नुपुर सिंह जी, दलबई साहब, बहुगुणा जी, सिंह साहब और उपस्थित सभी विद्वत सज्जनों, आज इस अवसर पर मैं आप सबके समक्ष उपस्थित होकर बहुत ही प्रसन्नता महसूस कर रहा हूँ, क्योंकि इससे पूर्व भी भारतीय कृषि की जो सफलतम आज तक की यात्रा है, उस यात्रा को सर्वोच्च सोपान तक पहुंचाने में आप सब विद्वत जनों का, वैज्ञानिकों का, सरकार की किसान हितैषी नीतियों का और किसान के परिश्रम का महत्वपूर्ण योगदान है। और यह योगदान की निरंतरता आगे बढ़ती रहे, इस मामले में सभी विद्वतजन प्रयत्न करते हैं और विशेष रूप से नीति आयोग, FAO, डॉक्टर चांद साहब की अगुवाई में लगातार प्रयत्न होता रहता है। उसी दिशा में यह पुस्तक भी आज लोकार्पित हुई है। मैं समझता हूँ यह एक ऐसा दस्तावेज है जो निश्चित रूप से आने वाले कल में भारत की कृषि की दिशा को निर्धारित करने में बहुत ही मददगार होगा। इसलिए मैं इस अवसर पर आप सबको, डॉक्टर चांद साहब, उनके सभी सहयोगियों को अपनी ओर से बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूँ, बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं इस मौके पर देना चाहता हूँ। और साथ ही साथ मैं उनको यह आश्वस्त भी करना चाहता हूँ कि जब जब आप सब ने कोई प्रयत्न किया है और सुझाव दिया है, तो मैं समझता हूँ विगत 7 वर्षों में कृषि के क्षेत्र में प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में जो काम हुआ है, उन सब में भी आप सबका सुझाव समाहित है। आप सबके सुझाव के कारण ही इन 7 वर्षों में एक ठीक प्रकार की यात्रा सफलता की ओर बढ़ रही है। इसमें भी निश्चित रूप से आप सबका योगदान है और आने वाले कल में भी जब जब आपके द्वारा दिग्दर्शन दिया जाएगा, भारत सरकार विचारपूर्वक उसको आगे बढ़ाने में ज़रूर मदद करेगी, ऐसा मैं इस अवसर पर आप सबको कहना चाहता हूँ। हम सब जानते हैं कि भारत के लिए कृषि की महत्ता बहुत ही है। प्रतिकूल परिस्थितियों में भी कृषि का क्षेत्र एक ऐसा क्षेत्र है जो देश को खड़ा रख सकने में सफलता दे सकता है। कोविड के कालखंड में भी अगर हम देखेंगे तो हमारे ध्यान में आएगा कि इतनी प्रतिकूल परिस्थितियों में भी कृषि के क्षेत्र ने, किसान के परिश्रम ने अपनी प्रासंगिकता को सिद्ध किया है। विगत 2 वर्षों में लगातार 3% की वृद्धि होती रही। यह हम सब लोगों के लिए शुभ संकेत है। निर्यात की दृष्टि से भी देखें तो यह कालखंड भी ऐसा कालखंड है जिसमें निर्यात में भी वृद्धि दर्ज की गई है। इस वृद्धि में भी आप सब लोगों का योगदान है, उसके लिए भी मैं आपको हृदय से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूँ। आज आप सबके परिश्रम के परिणाम स्वरूप भारत में उत्पादन की समस्या नहीं है। खाद्यान्न में तो हम अधिशेष राष्ट्र हैं। बाकी और कृषि उत्पादों में देखें तो हम ये पहले या दूसरे नंबर पर ही खड़े हुए हैं। एक समय था जब हरित क्रांति की धूम थी, लेकिन देश के किसानों ने, सरकार की नीतियों ने, आप सबके अध्ययन ने, साइंटिस्टों की रिसर्च ने हरित क्रांति के बाद श्वेत क्रांति भी की, पीली क्रांति भी की, अब मीठी क्रांति भी हो रही है। इस सब में आप सब लोगों का निश्चित रूप से योगदान अविस्मरणीय है। लेकिन आज समस्या है उत्पादकता बढ़ाने की। आज समस्या है उत्पादन को प्रबंधित करने की। आज समस्या है किसान को उसके उत्पाद का वाजिब दाम मिल जाए, इसलिए बाजार के लिंकेज प्रदान करने की। आज समस्या है किसान को अधोसंरचना उपलब्ध कराने की। इन सब के बीच कृषि झूल रही है। साथ ही साथ हम सब जानते हैं कि सारी सुविधाओं के बाद भी कृषि के क्षेत्र को प्रकृति पर निर्भर रहना पड़ता है। कई बार असामयिक प्राकृतिक प्रकोप होता है, उसके कारण किसान को नुकसान होता है। यद्यपि प्रधानमंत्री जी ने फसल बीमा योजना लागू करके किसानों को एक बड़ा सुरक्षा कवच दिया है। मैं समझता हूँ कि अभी 3-4 सालों में अगर हम देखेंगे तो लगभग 21,000 करोड़ रुपया फसल बीमा में किसानों का प्रीमियम जमा हुआ और 1,15,000 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक उनको नुकसान के मुआवजे के रूप में प्रदान किया गया है। एक बड़ा सुरक्षा कवच है, लेकिन फिर भी मैं समझता हूँ कि ये भी जब प्राकृतिक प्रकोप आता है तो अपर्याप्त ही होता है। जितना नुकसान होता है उसके पूरे नुकसान की भरपाई नहीं हो पाती। इसी प्रकार से आज मौसम परिवर्तन की स्थिति से हम सब भी चिंतित हैं और दुनिया भी चिंतित है। यद्यपि जलवायु परिवर्तन का असर समाज के सभी क्षेत्रों पर पड़ने वाला है, लेकिन विशेष रूप से कृषि का क्षेत्र उस पर तो बहुत ही असर करने वाला है। मुझे प्रसन्नता है कि आप सबके विचार के केंद्र में वह चुनौती भी है और हमारे जो वैज्ञानिक हैं वो भी इस दिशा में अनुसंधान करके इस परिस्थिति से हम कैसे निकलें और इसका मुकाबला कर सकें, इस दिशा में वो लोग विचार कर रहे हैं और कोशिश कर रहे हैं। गत दिनों में जो मैंने समस्याएं कृषि के समक्ष बताईं, उनको निराकरण तक पहुंचाने में प्रधानमंत्री जी के दूरदृष्टि के परिणाम स्वरूप अनेक योजनाएं भारत सरकार ने संचालित की हैं। उसी का परिणाम है कि देश के छोटे किसानों के लिए 10,000 एफपीओ बनाने का काम प्रारंभ हुआ है। इस पर केंद्र सरकार 6,865 करोड़ रुपया खर्च कर रही है। हम खाद्य तेलों पर आयात पर निर्भर करते हैं। निश्चित रूप से ये हम सब की चिंता का विषय है। पिछले दिनों प्रधानमंत्री जी ने देश के किसानों को अपील की तो दलहन के क्षेत्र में एक बड़ी छलांग हमारे देश के किसानों ने लगाई है। यद्यपि उड़द में, मसूर में हमारे को अभी काफ़ी दिक्कत है, उस दिशा में बढ़ना है, लेकिन जो छलांग है उस पर संतोष प्रकट किया जा सकता है। इसी प्रकार से तिलहन के क्षेत्र में भी इस अभाव को पूर्ति करने की दिशा में भारत सरकार ने ऑयल पाम मिशन भी बनाया है। उस पर 11,000 करोड़ रुपया सरकार खर्च करने वाली है और हमारी कोशिश है कि जब यह पूरी तरह पल्लवित, पुष्पित और फलदायी होगा तो आयात पर हमारी जो खाद्य तेलों की निर्भरता है उस पर काफ़ी हम पार पा पाएंगे, काफ़ी उसको कम करने में सफल हो पाएंगे। इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की जो आवश्यकता है उसके लिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फंड सिर्फ एग्रीकल्चर में ही उपलब्ध नहीं कराया, ये एनिमल हस्बेंड्री में भी, फिशरीज़ में भी, हर्बल खेती में भी, मधुमक्खी पालन में भी, छोटी प्रोसेसिंग यूनिट में भी, सब में आत्मनिर्भर पैकेज के अंतर्गत लगभग 1.5 लाख करोड़ रुपए का ये फंड प्रावधानित किया गया है, जो बहुत आसानी से बैंक से कम ब्याज दरों पर उपलब्ध है। और इसका लाभ भी आने वाले कल में जो समस्याएं कृषि के सामने हैं उनके निराकरण तक पहुंचने में हम सब लोगों को मदद मिलेगी। हम सब जानते हैं कि आज किसान की माली हालत सुधारना है तो थोड़ी परंपरागत खेती से आगे बढ़ने की आवश्यकता है, इसलिए वो हॉर्टिकल्चर की ओर बढ़े, फ्लोरिकल्चर की ओर बढ़े, टेक्नोलॉजी का उपयोग करे, महंगी फसलों की ओर जाए। और जितना टेक्नोलॉजी का उपयोग करेगा उतना ही उसके घर के पढ़े लिखे बच्चे भी गाँव में रुकेंगे और रोज़गार के अवसर प्राप्त कर पाएंगे और दूसरों को भी रोज़गार के अवसर दे पाएंगे। मुझे ध्यान है पिछले बार जब देश में टिड्डी आई थी तो मैं उस समय मंत्री बना था कृषि मंत्रालय में, तो एकदम बड़ा संकट था। बचपन में तो हम लोग देखते थे कभी टिड्डी आती थी तो हमारे यहाँ बहुत ज़्यादा नुकसान तो नहीं होता था, लेकिन फिर भी वो नुकसान करके जाती थी। लेकिन अभी इस बार आक्रमण ऐसा हुआ कि एकदम हाथ पैर फूल गए। मैंने पूछा कि भाई हाथ पैर क्यों फूल रहे हैं, तो मालूम पड़ा कि 30 साल से टिड्डी नहीं आई है, इसलिए जो हमारा तंत्र था वो पूरी तरह शिथिल पड़ा हुआ है। लेकिन जैसे तैसे कोशिश करके उस पर पार पाई और निश्चित रूप से सरकारों ने राज्य सरकार के साथ मिलकर अच्छा काम किया। लेकिन उस समय एक बात ध्यान में आई थी कि जो प्रकोप टिड्डी का था उसके लिए क्या ड्रोन का इस्तेमाल हम कर सकते हैं, और उस समय जब ड्रोन की बात आई तो ड्रोन की उपलब्धता नहीं हुई। ड्रोन की उपलब्धता हुई तो फिर तमाम प्रकार की अनुमतियों का सवाल था, कोई नीति नहीं थी, कोई पॉलिसी नहीं थी। लेकिन मुझे आभार प्रकट करना है प्रधानमंत्री जी का कि उस परिस्थिति में ड्रोन का उपयोग करने के लिए जो जो अनुमतियां चाहिए थी वो भारत सरकार के संबंधित विभागों ने उपलब्ध कराई, तो ड्रोन का बहुत अच्छे से टिड्डी को मारने के लिए उपयोग किया जा सका। तभी से प्रधानमंत्री जी के ध्यान में ये बात थी और इसलिए भारत सरकार ने अपनी ड्रोन पॉलिसी भी घोषित कर दी है और कृषि मंत्रालय ने भी ड्रोन के उपयोग के लिए अपने नियम कानून और अपनी स्कीम बना दी है, जिससे इसका बेहतर प्रचार प्रसार हो सके, यह लोगों के काम आ सके, किसान को बड़ी सुविधा प्रदान कर सके, अच्छे नौजवानों को रोज़गार की उपलब्धता इसके माध्यम से हो सके। ऐसे तमाम सारे प्रयत्न कृषि के क्षेत्र में लगातार किए जा रहे हैं। लेकिन हम सब जानते हैं, अभी अमिताभ कांत जी मुझे कह रहे थे कि बड़ा कठिन काम है आपका, तो मैं ये कह रहा था कि कुल मिला के कृषि का काम तो ऐसा है, ये हमेशा ही कठिनता से भरा ही रहेगा, जितना भी करो उतना ही कम है। मैं इस अवसर पर इस पुस्तक के विमोचन के मौके पर आप सबको, चांद साहब की पूरी टीम को हृदय से बहुत ही बधाई देता हूँ, शुभकामनाएं देता हूँ और मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि जो आपका प्रयत्न और आपकी कल्पना है, आपका परिश्रम है, वो सफल होगा। भारत सरकार आपके साथ कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर खड़ी रहेगी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Dhanyavad. Now we will have a felicitation ceremony to recognize the contributions of all the steering committee members of the National Dialogue. Professor Chand, Dr. Pramod Joshi, and Mr. Shyam Khadka, who are already on the stage, are already members of the steering committee. But there are others in the hall who are members of the steering committee, whom we would like to give a copy of the book to. Professor R.B. Singh, please. Yes, please. Dr. Ashok Dalwai. Dr. Praveen Malik. Dr. A.K. Singh. Mr. Pravesh Sharma. He's not here in the room with us. And Dr. Jessim Pius. Thank you. The other steering committee members who are joining us virtually and are not present here, we would like to acknowledge Dr. Abhilaksh Likhi, Dr. Mihir Shah, Mr. Siraj Hussain, Dr. R.S. Paroda, and Mr. Sunil Kumar. Thank you very much. Now, may I request Mr. Tomoyoshi Chiri to please felicitate the Agriculture Minister. Thank you, Tomyo-san. I now have the pleasant duty to present the vote of thanks on behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. We would particularly like to thank the Honorable Minister for Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare, Shri Narendra Singh Tomar, for releasing the book. Our heartfelt thank you to Honorable Professor Ramesh Chand, Member Agriculture of NITI Aayog and Chairperson of the Steering Committee of the National Dialogue, who led us through this entire dialogue process. Professor Chand, your support and collaboration is gratefully acknowledged. Respected Mr. Amitabh Kant, the Chief Executive Officer of the NITI Aayog, you have been very kind to give time to the National Dialogue, both at the virtual conference in January 2021 and now at this book release function. Thank you very much. Dr. Pramod Joshi, President, Agriculture Economics Research Association and member of both the Steering Committee and the Technical Review Team for the National Dialogue. You have been our constant go-to during this process. You have made time for this despite moments of personal bereavement and bouts of ill health. Thank you very much. We would also like to thank the moderators and panelists who are yet to speak. These will be Mr. Ashish Bahugana, who is the former Secretary, the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare, for his in-person participation. Our collective thanks to the panelists who will be speaking in the next session. Dr. Ashok Dalwai, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Rainfed Area Authority, who is also a member of the Steering Committee. Professor Bharat Ramaswamy, Professor Ashoka University, and Mr. Ajay Veer Jakhar, Chairperson of the Bharat Krishak Samaj. The book, its language editing, proofing, and printing would not be possible without the support of Ms. Sita Parthasarthi, Dr. Aruna Kumar Tomar, and Ms. Nupur Singh, Senior Editor Springer. A special mention also for Dr. Jessim Pius of the Society for Social and Economic Research. Thank you for your support. We also thank the NITI Aayog staff, that we have interacted with almost on a daily basis throughout the collaboration on the national dialogue. From within the FAO family, the former FAO representatives, Mr. Shyam Khadka, Mr. Tomio Shichiri, both of whom have guided us through this process and have specially made the trip to India for this book release function. To all my FAO colleagues as well, and also to all of you for engaging in this dialogue process. And finally, to the India International Center for all the assistance and the on-site arrangements. Thank you very much. We will now move on to the next part of the program, but thank you for this panel for releasing the book.
Congratulations, thank you, congratulations, and thank you. Well done.
My FAO colleagues will now take a moment to rearrange the stage to make it ready for the panel discussion. The audience in the hall is requested to regroup for the panel discussion, which will start shortly. Yes.
The entire collection was here where he was sitting.
Just ensure that they are correctly placed. Make it more centered.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Tomio-san's bag. May I take it downstairs? Yes, I think we should. We've already done it. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now resuming the program. We are now having a panel discussion on Indian agriculture towards 2030. May we request you to please take your seats. May I invite Mr. Ashish Bahuguna, the former Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, to please join us on the stage. May I also invite Mr. Ajayveer Jakhar, the chairperson of the Bharat Krisak Samaj, Dr. Ashok Dilbai, the Chief Executive Officer, National Rain-Fed Area Authority, please join us on stage, and Professor Bharat Ramaswamy, economist and professor at the Ashoka University. If you could please join us on the stage. We have about an hour before we break for dinner, and I now hand over to Mr. Bahuguna, please.
Thank you very much. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Must begin by thanking both the FAO as well as the NITI Aayog for this more than 2 years of labor, which has now culminated in this this book, which has been printed by Springers, and I must compliment Springers as well for making it open access so that more and more people can have access to this wonderful book. And and I was very encouraged by 2 or 3 things that were said during the previous session. One was the CEO of NITI Aayog said that it is in a sense, a policy prescription. It's a policy document, so that was very encouraging. Professor Ramesh Chand said that he ensured that the book spoke about what is to come immediately next, and it's not left for some long-term, interventions by all of us. And of course, the minister assured us of all his support, so that's extremely encouraging. So to kick off, because we are already, I think, behind time, we did have the policy framework of Indian agriculture was for a major part of our existence focused on increasing production for national food security. And while we have been saying for quite some time now that that focus has now shifted to ensuring nutritional security, ensuring sustainability, and also trying to increase farmers' income, the fact remains that most of the programs and policies of the government and the ecosystem that the government has tried to create still remains geared towards enhancing of production. And that is why even in, I will not name the speaker, but even in the previous session, there was a lot of emphasis on how much of increase in production and all has taken place. And that is not necessarily something to be, excited about, because the ills or evils that plague agriculture are not really limited, or evils that plague Indian agriculture are not limited to production per se. But we have, to say more on this subject and to more about their, first of all, I think we'll divide this session in 2 rounds. First, I'll ask all of you gentlemen to about your thoughts on this book, if you have managed to glance through it. And then in the second round, we'll ask about your reflections on the way forward to transforming the Indian agriculture systems towards what is required in 2030. So we have a very eminent panel, academicians, policymakers, practitioners. So I think that is the best kind of combination we can have. So let me begin by requesting, who will go first? The academician, I think, to lay the framework of the discussion. Your thoughts on the book, sir. Professor Ramaswamy, please.
Thank you very much. The book is, of course, a very impressive achievement. And like everybody else, I'm really waiting to go through it in detail. So my impressions are entirely right now casual. And based on the summaries that have been provided here today, and I can see that it's comprehensive and it covers virtually everything, and it covers a lot of ground. I'm actually, with the permission of the chair, I'm going to, in terms of also going to lay out my remarks on the path ahead in connection with what I heard. Okay, so I think that as you rightly prefaced, that there is while we speak about productivity and production, we know that the problems are much greater and more complicated. So in this connection, when we speak about Indian agriculture, we can take a very sectoral perspective, but we know that equally important are consumers, as well as the people working in that sector. So first about the consumers, I think since Dr. Ramesh Chand is here and other policymakers, I think it would be helpful if we had some greater clarity on what are our goals here. And we speak about nutrition, but I think as at a policy level, we have never had explicit goals. For instance, we know that if you look at NSS data between the bottom decile and the top deciles, there is a big gap in the consumption of non-cereals. Okay? Not so much in cereals, but there's inequality in consumption of cereal, of milk, of pulses, fruits and vegetables. So it would be, I feel, it could, all our recommendations could become sharper if we had explicit goals. Like, for instance, what about doubling per capita milk consumption among the bottom 50%? And that would still not, between the top deciles and the bottom deciles, there's a gap of maybe 5 or 6 times. But how about that? How are we starting with modest? And similarly, for instance, if the bottom half the population consumes, limited amount of dal, maybe I forget the figures now, but it's again, the difference between the bottom and the top is about 3 times. So I feel that having such goals of nutritional improvements in the diet in terms of actually their consumption, if we just look at the National Institute of Nutrition, it tells us this has to be your plate. Okay, I won't even go that far. I would even say that where is our, how is our, the bottom 50% or even bottom 80% of the population with reference to that diet, and how far can we go in the next 10 years? And that, I would say, would provide enormous value, and that kind of goal setting can only be done by NITI Aayog and government think tanks, and as to what is possible. But it really would energize, I think, all the production things that you were talking about. So, it would really energize that, and give a context to all the productivity improvements that you're talking about. And in fact, it would give a great context also to the investments in R&D and science and technology that were mentioned at the beginning of today, and which are contained in the chapter. So that's one thing that. The second thing is about the people who work in that sector, and I think there is a lot of value in this book about that. I would step a little outside that. I would say that all the people who work in the sector, we often think in terms of price policies, or we think in terms of insurance or other assistance in terms of credit. I would say, why not also look at the people who work there, whether producers or agricultural labor, as citizens of this country? And when we think about that, then our attention would automatically go to health, education, jobs, rural infrastructure, and so on. I feel that a lot of the stress, and this is work that I'm doing right now, a lot of stress, in fact, we know that that livelihoods in agriculture are precarious. They're also very variable. These are characteristics shared by actually the entire unorganized sector, not just agriculture sector. It's something that is shared by all of them. The organized sector we know is very small, and that enjoys many of the protections that come with the organized sector. So my point is that when there is when incomes take a hit, when the already low incomes take a hit because of price shocks or production shocks, the immense amount of stress that comes because somebody has to pull their children out of school, or because they are not able to afford health care. And so it's that stress could be much less if we had also make sure that our rural population receives the same kind of attention in terms of these public goods as the urban population. I would go, and certainly they have the same concerns of the urban population, which is jobs. And when we think about jobs, we realize that, it's very important for our community to tell the policymakers that labor-intensive industrialization and growth is very important for agriculture. What pathways can we promise to our rural labor force if we are not going to speak about those kind of issues? So I really feel that we cannot keep our discussion. This is the starting point, and this book takes us a long way forward. But we surely, I feel that it is within our remit, even though we work a lot on agriculture, but it is within still our remit, because we see the livelihoods of people in that sector depends on the non-farm sector as well. So we have to speak about that as well, and policies that affect our sector. So I think this was just by nature of what I think that this book, the themes in this book can be woven into a larger narrative, which would help in setting goals and also in expanding the discourse. Of course, the book has fabulous wealth of information and on the pressing challenges, which include, people have talked about it in terms of climate change, sustainability, and so on. And I am waiting to read through it. And I'm sure it'll be enriching to see what the book has to say about these things. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Dalwai, we can do one of two things. One is that you can either give your own thoughts on the book and completely, I won't say disregarding, but your own thoughts and not taking them, or you can, continue on this train of thought that Professor Ramaswamy has left us with, is that agriculture is, the story is much larger than agriculture. So we should need to address the story. That is one point that Professor Ramaswamy made. The other is that, you look at the, agriculture needs to look at both the workers in the agriculture sector as well as the consumers. Though I personally feel that actually the agriculture sector is one which has actually so far only been looking at the consumers and not the actual practitioners of agriculture, and that is probably the bane of why prices are the way they are. And thirdly, and more importantly, that, we tend to, in all our recommendations, talk in generalities and not set very specific goals. And unless we set specific goals, we cannot have specific pathways. We do not understand the implications. We do not understand what are the trade-offs required. So then they remain just, talk and do not really lead us to the way forward. But I leave it to your judgment. Dr. Dalwai, please.
Thank you, sir. In fact, I had been mentally consolidating my thoughts what to speak, and now you actually put me in a quandary, but I'll try to reconcile. No, so you just say.
So you can stay with your thoughts and then maybe add
No, I will certainly try to fit in with what you really want me to do. First, I think I would like to really congratulate everybody who has contributed to this book. The reason is, for the first time, it talks about agriculture as an agriculture value system. So it looks at three important stakeholders. It looks at farmers who are crying for incomes. It looks at consumers who are in urgent need of nutrition for their health. And thirdly, it looks at ecology, the health of the ecology. And unless we understand and appreciate that these three are important stakeholders and are organically linked, we'll never be able to do justice to agriculture in the future. Whatever has happened so far is not the failure of the system, but because we were reacting to a certain situation. Today we have the luxury of responding, and therefore In that sense, this particular book is a paradigm shift, and it provides an inflection point to the scientists, to the academics, to the policy makers, and all other stakeholders, including the industry and the farmers at large. So we should be able to popularize the contents of this book. The second one is that when you deal with agriculture, which is as large or larger than the ocean, it is very difficult to condense the whole thing into a simple book. And this book, I must say, has probably used the nanotechnology to condense and put everything so densely, so it makes a very good reading at one go. The volume is not too thick, it is very optimal, and also the size is very optimal, and the language is good, there's consistency, and there's logic. The third point that I would like to make is normally edited books are disjointed, because every author or every chapter writer is writing his own thoughts. But here, since a lot of thought has gone into structuring the chapters, so it really builds it up logically. And as we see, the opening remarks by the chairman of the committee, by none other than Professor Ramesh Chand himself, who is one of our leading policymakers of the country, and conclusion by Professor Pramod Joshi, who abstracts the whole thing. So I think it has been bracketed very well. Those 8 chapters have been bracketed by the opening remark and the concluding abstraction. So that therefore this book makes a comprehensive single-authored book. There may be many chapters, many intellectuals who have written it, but it makes it reading. And then, of course, as is no gainsaying that it has been so well edited in terms of its format, in terms of its font size, its uniformity is all excellent. So that is the first, I think I thought, let me make these opening remarks. And since many of you may not have actually gone through the book, I would spend a little bit of time to say what are the important takeaways from each of the chapters. The first thing is that the context has been well laid by the chairman of the committee, because very rightly has it been chosen to work in sync with the SDGs. There's no point of looking at the horizon which we cannot touch for the next 10, 20 years. SDG is knocking on our door, so very rightly the context has been well set. Now, Professor Gulati and his co-author, they are talking of very, very important 3 things. One is they're talking innovations, incentives, and institutions. Without these 3 things, without a carrot and stick, we cannot deliver in terms of human behavioral change. Ultimately, the farmer's behavior has to be changed, and therefore the policies and science and technology have to be redesigned. And he's talking about that. Then he's talking about very important inputs, critical inputs, land, water, cropping patterns. The example of cotton or rice that has been given there as to how embedded water is being exported out, and there is no sync between the agroecology and the cropping program that we are adopting in our country. And then 2 other important aspects that I must highlight is women issues, which are in need of attention now, and then the various negatives that have happened so far and how to address them through intensification. So we need intensification in the future, but how do we now reconcile the need for intensification of agriculture with sustainable technology and more efficient farm management practices? I think that issue has been brought out. Then in the chapter on dietary diversity, I think 3 things which India has neglected so far have been brought up. One is the food safety concerns. We have never been bothered about the food quality standards, and therefore what Dr. Shyam Khadka was talking about, that we have been too inward looking rather than trying to look outward, which is so necessary if we need to expand our market. Fortification, biofortification. It responds to the need for nutrition as one of the important themes. Reducing post-harvest losses. This has been highlighted very well. And then the last important thing that has been brought out by these authors is water, sanitation, and public hygiene. That these are co-linked. Water and soil cannot be differentiated. And then public hygiene and sanitation cannot be taken away if we are looking at One Health. On the climate risks in agriculture, it's good that we have talked about crops, livestock, and fishery. So I'm very happy particularly that fishery and livestock sectors have also been brought in along with crops, which tends to take a dominant attention all the time. But then we need to take this forward by, at the policy making level as to how do we now design risk covers for livestock and fish. We have to some extent succeeded in building a risk cover for the crops, which of course needs a lot of change so far. But livestock and fishery, not much has been done. We have done something, but it requires a total overhaul. So therefore, I would like to talk about these things. And then the chapter on symbiosis of water and agriculture, I think Mihir Shah has really brought up the good thing because he's now shifted the attention from supply side to demand side. India has been focusing in the last 70 years on supply management. We all are aware that even if we utilize all the utilizable water that India has got, yet the major area under cultivation would be under rain-fed. So what does it mean? That if we do not know how to create an efficient demand, how to enable the farmers and other stakeholders to use it efficiently, we will not be able to improve the efficiency of the capital investment being made in irrigation. So today the need is for capital use efficiency, whether it is in irrigation or land development. And generally capital investment in agriculture has been dominated by irrigation. That is well known. So how do we therefore now use capital use efficiency? By promoting all kinds of demand side management. So that has been brought up. And he's also brought one good thing, that so far agriculture is focused on, it is mostly, it is speculated on the strong. That means strong means where water is available, where the good soils are there. It has actually discriminated against the weaker part of the country, the rain-fed areas, the small farmers, the marginal farmers. So the betting on the strong, which has been very nicely worded there, means that we have actually looked at where we could harvest the low-hanging fruits. But today the time has come for us to actually look at the more difficult ones, which are lying in the crevices, which are in the valleys, which are there behind the rock. So I think that's what the reorientation of agriculture required. And as we do this, certainly we need to go in for the diversification of diet will happen provided we do the diversification of the cropping patterns, so the production pattern, not just crops but also agricultural activities including livestock and fisheries, and therefore the water has to be managed well. And the overall lesson that this particular chapter brings is agriculture has been using 86% of the available water in India, as against the global average of 70%. We need to now therefore achieve efficiency of water use in agriculture and start releasing water for industry, infrastructure, habitation, which are today in need of higher water. And then the pests and pandemic. I think this has been written really good scientists who have done a great job in this thing, I must say. They have talked about livestock and fisheries besides crops. That's a very good thing. Otherwise, once again, crops dominate. But most important is transboundary plant pests. Both water and pests, they are transboundary. For example, water. 150 out of 191 countries share transboundary groundwater. And within the water domain, groundwater is more important than the surface water. Likewise, pests and disease do not recognize artificial constructs called countries, states, and districts. So this chapter brings attention to the transboundary pests. And one very good thing they've done is the most neglected issues have been weeds and nematodes in our country. Nematodes and weeds are now posing a new challenge to the management, and that attention has been drawn to towards this. On the chapter relating to agroecology based alternatives, I would say the central meat of this particular chapter is asking India to what is called focus on duty to care for. It is talking about what is called India to adopt a stewardship approach, which means that today we have looked at what is called as partial health, whereas today ecology-based agriculture is what is being talked about world over, particularly in tropical climates of Africa, Asia. Ecology-based agriculture calls for a ecosystem approach where One Health is a central theme. One Health means health of the human beings, health of the domestic animals, health of the plants, health of the wild animals, health of the plants and general soil and water and climate. Only when we are able to harmonize the health of all these things, we will be able to reorient production and other aspects of agriculture. So this particular chapter talking about stewardship is very important, and I think the policymakers must appreciate the meaning of this thing. And sir, the chapter on science, technology, and innovation, it is excellent, I must say, because the best of people have really contributed, who are scientists, who are also technical administrators, and who have been policy designers. It includes everything from acupuncture to zodiac. So there's nothing that they have left there. So they have, but most important, what they have really focused is nutrition-led agriculture, income-led agriculture, then subsistence to commercial agriculture by adopting indigenous technical knowledge. ITKs have been forgotten. When we now talk of conservation agriculture, for example, ITK is more important. But how do you standardize those ITKs and then upgrade them in terms of technology so that the farmers can then adopt them at large scale? And one very good thing they've also talked about is the science of discovery to science of delivery. Today all of us do science only for writing papers mostly, and within the ICR system, it is all because scorecard based. Sir, I'll hurry up. So therefore, I think science of delivery, when I understand what is our delivery, that means nutrition, ecology, and the consumer's interest, that is farmer's interest, then I think we'll be able to do better. In the structural reforms, once again, it is extremely comprehensive. I think one that hits the bullseye there is for now the constitutional division of responsibilities between state and center has been very clearly defined. And it is very critical why production can be a state subject. Post-harvest cannot be a state subject because we are artificially dividing our market, Indian market, to the disadvantage of the farmers. And Constitution is very clearly talking about marketing being within the domain of the Parliament, and it should rather override the states, and therefore the authors have very clearly brought out the advantage of having a centralized system of marketing and post-harvest management. And very good analysis has been done between the expenditure on capital and expenditure on subsidies. And very good analysis you have done, I must say. And then, contrary to the perception that all subsidies are bad, the authors bring out that some subsidies are required. And they too also help in crowding in of the investments from different sectors. So we should not be punching the subsidy bag all the time, but it doesn't mean that we should not divert more funds for capital investments, but I think this capital investment and subsidy aspect has been very well brought out. So there are many things that you have done, and that we should move away from price support to income support. I think everybody agrees that we must certainly. Not everybody. Okay, most. Okay. Good. Then only you can have healthy debate. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's good. And then, of course, it has been very well summed up by Professor Joshi about demand and supply, investment, global focus, and all other things have been summed up very well. So I would say, sir, that this book really brings out centrally the whole comprehensive understanding, puts in context. And in the next round, sir, I would like to say what more can be done. There are many things which can be done. And I wish that once again the same body takes up those aspects, then it will give a more rounded thing to agriculture. So I would not say at this juncture now, because we're going chocolate, I don't want to take it away. So we'll talk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That's a wonderful exposition of what the book contains for those who haven't managed to have a glance at it as yet. But Ajayji, you kind of gave the game away, but I was about to ask you, you have heard all of this before. There's the issues that have been, reiterated in the book, some of the solutions that have been expounded. You've heard them all. Is it, a sense of déjà vu, or are you enthused about the fact that maybe for the first time in a comprehensive way, an organ of the government is trying to push real transformative reform in the agriculture sector? Your thoughts as a practitioner.
Thank you so much, Bhagwana sir. So it's really nice to be here with Ramesh Chandi sitting here, who's mentored me in many ways, and I hope whatever I say is acceptable also to people here. I drove today from the farm. I come straight from my village today, from Abhor, And Shalini ji was nice enough to send me a e-copy, and I was reading the book. Obviously, it's too dense a book. You need time to go into depth of everything. But first thing, I went to the chapters, and I found that a book on Indian agriculture had no chapter from any farmer representative or any farmer, and I think that goes to the core of any forward-looking policy. So Bhagna ji, you've joined us in so many Bharat Krishak Samaj programs. This has been our advocacy point, to the point of it being like rote in every subject, is that farmers need to be at the heart of every policy. Then I started reading the book, Ramesh Chandji, and I find that economists have written chapters, and let me quote. So whenever they like something, they say agriculture experts say this, what they propose, and what they think that the government, if someone is opposed to their ideas, then they say, to quote, non-government organizations, civil society, and farmers say such and such, and they oppose such and such policies. So how is it that someone who's done economics becomes an expert, and someone who's practicing on the farm becomes an outsider? And that also goes to the heart of how we are going to evolve agriculture going forward. Knowledge does not come from reading. Knowledge comes from practicing. And that is the knowledge that needs to be captured, I think so, in the policy space. Ashok Dalwai Saab, who has always, I not only admire, but he's always been there to help me, also said that farmers' behavior needs to be changed. Dalwai Saab, I want to add, I think so, behavior of policymakers needs to be equally changed. So I'm just trying to put in points rather than go into every chapter of the book that has already been mentioned, and there is shortage of time, so I just made some notes on this. Then what the book really lacks, I think so, is practical problems that we will face going forward. It does not talk about the financial health of the nation. You could prescribe giving cash transfers to millions of people. You could prescribe agriculture research funding. In PAU, a PhD student gets 15,600 rupees as a starting pay. You need money for it. So when you factor in problems on how to solve, when you give solutions, you have to factor in problems which will be overriding irrespective of what happens. Then we don't talk about that world is not flat, it is not fair. We have a WTO which does not allow us to do what we want to do. WTO gives factors in subsidies based on value of produce, and I personally as a farmer think it should be based on per capita productivity on people who are involved with it. So these are issues that will always hang on us, and capacity of policymakers to think out of the box, to think out of silos. Even when you look at this book, you will find that it's a fantastic compiling of different authors talking about very relevant topics. But when you try and look at the topics, you will find that the prescriptions are contradictory to each other. One could say that you are progressive, like you're a progressive farmer. In one of the first functions when I started working with our farmers organization, Arvind Padiji, somebody said, Ajay is a progressive farmer. One guy got up and said, what is a progressive farmer? Just because you use optimum utilization of chemicals and pesticides, do you become progressive? Or do you become progressive because you're using agroecology and it's post-modern agriculture? How do you look at a problem? What is progressive? So these are the other issues. One or two other issues that came up was, and I think the test, I'll just end here. I think the test of this book and of the prescriptions is how many will the government adopt over the next few years? How many will the government adopt? You can come up with a theoretical thing, yes, we will do this, but how many will the government adopt? And that's the real test of prescribing a policy. Will it be adopted or will it not be adopted? We could always say somebody did this, somebody did that. That's not how it's going to work. The other part I find difficult as a farmer, as a practitioner, Bhagnaji is looking at is politically correct and trying to be politically correct while it makes sense to be politically incorrect. For example, for saying in one of the chapters it says, why not allow slaughter, or even say allow slaughter of it's about cattle. It says an innovative solution to tackle the problem is selective sex semen technology, which facilitates the production of genetically improved high milk producing females at a faster rate and eliminates redundant male cattle. Why can't you just say allow slaughter of animals? Why can't you say allow slaughter of, because when I'm on the road, biggest problem I have in my village, Ramesh Chandji, today, when I was a small kid, jab R.B. Singh ji used to come and help my grandfather in cotton farming, the biggest problem was nilgai. It was wild animals who would come and destroy a crop. Today there are no nilgais. There are only stray cattle on the roads, and we all need to fence our lands. So, and most of those cattle are these hybrids. And so I think we need to not be politically correct all the time. And this is a difficult thing, but we need to do it. When you look at someone talking about water, it says when we look only at, it says we need to reduce paddy to save water, but what about reducing paddy cultivation? What about reducing monoculture to save biodiversity? How do you value matrix? These are different issues that can come up, but I think so. I will just end here. And I want to say another thing, and sorry, the last thing is that farmers will need to be supported in perpetuity. If we think we can make farmers Atmanirbhar, we cannot. We can try and make communities Atmanirbhar to some extent. We can try and make communities, but you can't make farmers Atmanirbhar. I think they will need to be supported by direct cash transfers, by income transfers, as Dalwai Saab is saying, and other means of subsidy also in some form or the other. But for prescriptions on going forward, if there's time, then I'll want to take 2 minutes on that also. Thank you so much.
No, you can carry on.
Carry on. So I think I'll just carry on. And so I really think what this country needs is area production planning. It needs political will. And that area production plan must have incentives and disincentives. So for example, there is an area where, let's say in the middle of Vidarbha, you're doing sugarcane plantation. So there has to be a disincentive that should you do these number of crops, you will not get any incentive from the government. We'll have to factor these in, and I think so we'll have to go down at a block level. You can't do it at a district level planning. District level planning, where I am in Firozpur district, that district goes on for 2.5, 3 hours. The soil changes every village, the climate changes, the soil changes, the weather pattern changes, everything changes. So I think this district planning is important. The other thing is we need to start documenting failure. I really think this is my suggestion to NITI Aayog, is why do we always only want to document success stories and come up with it? Why don't we document failures? Why don't we give this job to farmer organizations to do this? And this suggestion I gave to the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharamanji. And I think, Ramesh Chandji, you were there in that meeting, budget discussion. She said it's a very good idea. I said, but nobody will take it forward. Nobody will allow it to take it forward. But we need to document failures so we don't repeat the same mistakes again. We got to allow beneficiaries of programs to assess those programs, not third party. We can't get FAO to come and assess if FPOs are working or not working. On the ground, I know FPOs are not working. 10,000 FPOs. The test of time is 5 years from now, how many of those 10,000 FPOs will actually be working? Forming an FPO, and 3 years from now, having them to file a DIN number and a SIN number, I will tell you how big a problem it is. We did an assessment of poly houses in Punjab when I was chairman of the Farmers Commission. 95% of the poly houses put up in Punjab in 10 years had failed. 95% of them. So till you don't, and it's not that they can't succeed, it's that we were investing only in infrastructure, we were not investing in human resources. We were not investing in extension services and food parks. How many food parks are succeeding, you tell me? This is a policy that's been going on for 20 years, a food park policy. If we are able to assess, and I think this is something that is required. Other than that, I think we need a measurement metrics on how to value. Just as Ashish Bhuguna was saying, we don't need to do only productivity. We want to value biodiversity. How are we going to do it? We need a measurement metrics with it. It's going to take 5-10 years to make it, and then constantly keep evolving it. And we need a market intelligence system. I think that is an absolute must. It must be existing somewhere in central government. I don't know. At least in Punjab where I was, maybe it is particular to Punjab. We could not do it. It was a failure on our part. And I think that needs to be done. And last 2 points would be, we need to prioritize human capital over physical resources. This whole idea of creating food value chains, the whole idea of creating infrastructure, processing, I think so is very important. But we need to first prioritize human resources. There is a lack of extension service officers. The universities have very little staff. I think around 50 or at least 40% vacancies are there. हमारे तो पंजाब में PAU के vice chancellor भी नहीं है. The last incumbent nearly auctioned off the post. I shouldn't be saying it, but this is a hard fact. And the last point is that we need a 20-year campaign for consumer behavior change. That has to be an integral part of an agriculture policy looking forward. That behavior change of what you eat. Why is edible oil consumption so high? Why don't we tax foods high in, salt? Why don't we tax foods high in sugar? Why don't we tax foods high in fat? If we are going to give incentives to food processing, then we have to give disincentives for bad food also. 70% of the sugar is going into commercial establishments. And why are we subsidizing commercial establishments' sugar intake? By keeping sugar prices low or something. I think this whole policy of trying to get a policy which is like a food systems policy is very difficult to design. And for that we need a different mindset change. And I would want to say that it cannot be done without farmers. नहीं तो 2030 क्या 2050 भी हो जाएगा. वो बचपन में भगना जी वो गाना सिखाते थे हम होंगे कामयाब किसी दिन. हम वो गाना गाते ही रहेंगे जिंदगी भर. That is all I want to say. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Ajay ji. But I really don't think that this sense of despondency that you brought out in your last remarks was really meant.
No,
and I'm sure.
Sir, I mean it absolutely. It's not about productivity.
But
I'm sure. Talk to the farmers in the villages
but
and they will tell you.
But I'm sure. No, I think all of us take your point that there's a lot of preaching, and preaching is easy. The policymakers, the academicians. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do. The second easiest thing to do is to build infrastructure, concrete infrastructure. It's easy, it's tangible, you can show results. Yes, these many things constructed. But yes, to get the people to man those resources, that infrastructure, in the most efficient and effective way, needs human resources, and that you've hit the nail on the head. We're lacking sorely in human resources, not only in the field of agriculture, but in all sectors in India. And that is something that has been neglected right from the very beginning. And possibly what Professor Ramaswamy said in the very beginning, he was alluding to that. Not merely human resources, but generally the state of affairs in rural India. So unless we look upon all of this in an integrated manner, it's not likely to, we can be well-meaning, but, intentions do not always translate into real success. But Professor Ramaswamy, anything to add after Ajayji's fiery comments?
I think I still need time to digest.
It was a long drive.
But especially in respect of the way forward. I mean, all of us are aware of, more or less aware at least, of what the problems are and what. But what exactly can be done over the next 5 to 10 years is, if you could try and kind of, focus on that.
I think I think everyone would agree with the substance of Ajay's remarks in the sense that we need to be, and that this is a framework, but actually the particulars of what works and what doesn't is, of course, something that's really important in policy making. I think that I would just go back to saying, that it's I think there is a larger issue is that what is our influence and as a community of whether researchers or practitioners or government, what is our influence on really capturing the policy space. I think we have a problem that agricultural policy is regarded in a silo. It's not part of the mainstream, and I think we have to. There is a failure in communication, And so I think that it's important for us to connect these themes to the fact that these are to the bread and butter issues of the entire economy. And so I feel that many of these things will get resonance if we are able to do that. And so really to me I don't in fact I think these are very valuable recommendations, and I don't have any great wisdom to offer here in terms of that this is the path forward really, but I do worry and reflect, and I think I would urge that we should reflect a little bit about our voices not heard very much in some sense. When we speak about, for instance, many of our colleagues here spoke eloquently about R&D, for instance, or agricultural R&D. It's a very, very tiny part of our spending, very, very tiny. It should be easy to increase it, and yet it never happens. It doesn't happen. And so there is no constituency for it. And so so these are the things that I worry about, that these are, that there is in terms of the path forward, I feel that we need, you work in the government, you are all working in the government, but how do we have greater leverage in terms of getting a message across? And if we do that, then perhaps part of the problems of Ajay will be solved, because sometimes a lot of spending happens just as which is not substantive, but provides some kind of political comfort. But perhaps if we are able to communicate the urgency of these problems better, we might be able to move the needle a little bit. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. But Professor, it's not so simple. Even if, for instance, if the R&D budget that you alluded to is increased, is doubled, what happens? Except, I would suspect, and there are a lot of learned people from the NARS system here, I would suspect that what would happen is a democratic division of funds. And each sector and subsector would get an incremental amount. So where is the focus in everything? So while, so we really need to home in on what needs to be done, where it needs to be done, and how it needs to be done. And as the only policy maker on the table, I think Dr. Dalwai has to answer these questions. So.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think you rightly brought our attention to the need for prioritizing the initiatives, keeping in mind what the future is required to do. So I firmly believe that in contrast to the developmental theory that we used to have in 19th and 20th centuries, where surplus labor in agriculture would be absorbed by the growing industry and service sectors, is not going to happen in 21st century. And two reasons, according to me, are India's huge population and continuing to grow population. Second one is emerging technologies. And all these emerging technologies are highly labor substituting. Though we believe that disruptive technologies also create new kinds of jobs, but the nature of the emerging technologies in the 21st century is such that the number of new jobs they'll create will not be proportionate to the number of jobs that will be lost. Therefore, I feel agriculture is the only way to absorb the labor force. And therefore, the agriculture has to be mandated, among others, as a job creator, as an income creator, as a wealth creator. If we need to do that, we need to relook at agriculture and then relook at the agriculture markets. So agriculture markets cannot be only human consumption markets. They can either be only cattle feed consumption markets, they have to be industrial consumption markets, which that takes us to bioeconomy. And it's also required in the light of climate change, in the light of enhancing expanding the market meaning beyond the food grains. Therefore, bioeconomy linked to secondary agriculture. These two things must become the mandate of agriculture. Believing that agriculture has to create gainful employment. What has happened in the last 10 years or 20 years is, though some labor has shifted out from agriculture, it has all got absorbed in informal jobs, which are not steady jobs, which are not highly paying. So we have just made them some security guards somewhere, for example. So if we need to create gainful jobs, meaningful jobs, respectable jobs, then agriculture itself has to go beyond the farms and get into the post-harvest management, and therefore secondary agriculture must become one of the divisions within the Ministry of Agriculture, within this ICAR. And it's good that ICAR for the first time is now upgrading its institute, LAC Research Institute, is an institute of secondary agriculture. That is on the cards. So likewise, I think the Department of Agriculture, Department of Animal Husbandry, Department of Fisheries must all have a secondary agriculture. And among the states, Karnataka is the first state to have done it, a separate directorate, and we would now like every state to do it. So that is the first thing I would say, so that there is focus in terms of research, in terms of policies. The second, I was saying in my previous talk that what are the other things that actually should be brought into focus? One important thing is I think we needed post-harvest management as an independent chapter. Though it has been dealt with in transformative agriculture chapters, in different chapters, but in order to break that mindset of production centricity and to bring the much needed focus on post-harvest, including agri-logistics, processing and marketing, we certainly need to write one independent chapter. That is one. The second one is that risk management, we have talked mostly in terms of technologies. But I think today risk management has to be also non-technology, means financial oriented risk management. Whether Fasal Bima Yojana, crop insurance, livestock insurance, fishery insurance. Along with these things, how do we use digital technology for covering risks through prediction models? If we're all talking about agriculture linked to markets, then there has to be a prediction on demand, prediction on supply, and the global as well as domestic, and prediction using models on pests and diseases. So I thought that digital technology in agriculture should also warrants an independent chapter, so that our attention goes there and everybody starts looking at it. The third thing which also deserves a lot of attention is extension. Somehow all of us, right in the agriculture education system itself, the last student who can't get any other subject goes to extension. It is thought it is not required. But the most difficult in our system is extension. Transferring technology to the farmers is the most challenging. And somehow we have not been able to pay attention to that. So today, as Ajay was saying, the whole country is suffering from absence of extension. Our own analysis shows that 50% of the staff is not there in the states. 50% of the professors are not there in universities. So neither agriculture university is able to meet its extension demands, nor the public extension system is able to do, nor have we enabled the private sector to take over the extension or at least supplement the extension. So how do we make extension a responsibility of private sector, of public sector and the universities, including the KVKs, so that there is a comprehensive approach to extension? So I think one chapter on extension is very much required. And the fourth one is relating to rainfed agriculture. Though we have been dealing with climate resilience, etc., but many a time placing a particular thing is as important as the substance. I think in order to create a right perception, because perceptions do matter, so I think one chapter can be brought on purely rainfed agriculture, because that's where the productivity is low. It is 1.1 ton per hectare average against 3 tons in irrigated areas. It is there, the organic carbon is absolutely nil more or less, it is just 0.1, 0.2. So all the problems are there, and all the deficit crops, pulses, oil seeds are all from the rain-fed areas. And if excess of wheat and paddy is there, it is all coming from the irrigated areas. So how do we therefore create a new perception around these are more or less scheduled areas, the rain-fed areas, the pulses, the oil seeds, and other kinds of drought resilient things. So I think, sir, I would say that the whole thing is important. And the last one, not to be forgotten, is livestock and fisheries sector. Though it has been dealt with in different chapters, now no more are the allied sectors. The very fact that the GDP contribution of livestock and fisheries is increasing much faster than that of crop sector, and it is coming to occupy a niche place on its own. We now need to start. So I think, according to me, sir, we should stop calling them allied sectors. We should rather now call them as independent sectors, given the fact that the number of jobs created, the contribution in terms of GDP, GBA is increasing. So, and therefore, one exclusive chapter on livestock and one exclusive chapter on fisheries, because these sectors can learn from the mistakes of the inadequacies of the crop sector, where we did not focus on markets, whereas these sectors which are now growing can also simultaneously look at markets. So this is what I would say, and otherwise this is a great book. If we can just bring this, therefore I was saying at the outset that if we can also work on these things, these two volumes together would be a great contribution to the 2047 vision that the Government of India is writing now. This can be going to that, and not to pat our own back, but I must say that the report on the doubling farmers' income has all these things actually, and so that, and the point that you really raised, and even Mr. Ajay was raising, that what is the point of writing policies if they are not converted into action plans? And I also find that most of the time our policies don't get converted into action plans. Most people don't read them. And I've seen the same thing with DFI report also. While something has been converted, a lot still has not been converted. So I think we must focus on educating, orienting the state governments. Large number of workshops can be held to educate what is there in the book. Nobody reads these days. I mean, nobody has time to read. So if we can actually give a lecture, I guess they'll at least understand something, particularly the state government secretaries, the directors, university vice chancellors, and such other people who really matter can be actually oriented about the contents of this book, sir. I think that will take a step forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Zalwai. Only thing is, if everything is important, then nothing remains important. That is the problem. Because then there are too many things to do and you wait for somebody else to do it. But any last thoughts?
Farmers always have last words. You saw it with the farm laws also.
Yeah.
The farmers have the last word. I think my experience is that how we design a policy is the most important thing. Bharat Krishak Samaj has been working on coming to the process of designing a policy. Dalwai Sahab, we were very fortunate and honored to have Dalwai Sahab at one of those processes in Goa with us. So normally the Government of India and states do, you find an objective and then you design how to reach that objective. As a farmers organization,
one correct pathway to achieving your objectives. There could be a multiplicity of pathways and different pathways in different regions and so on and so forth. So that was encouraging. As long as everybody keeps an open mind, and as long as those in power are willing to take the hard decisions, because some of the decisions that need to be taken in agriculture, because you're right, we have been talking about policy reforms in agriculture for several years, and it's not that these are not recognized. But the implications sometimes are seem to be slightly insurmountable. And what happens is, unfortunately, and I must confess that this is a affliction that that most of us suffer from, is that even the policymakers and the practitioners and the academicians try to think in political terms. That, all right, this has this political implication, so therefore we will prescribe something else. Leave politics to the politicians.
Yes.
You know?
Good point.
and give them the policy options, right? This is, if you do this, these are the implications. If you do, but there's a, one rung below, you can do something else. And I think we try to, anticipate what the politicians want to do. And I think that probably is all of us think there's a saying in Hindi, in colloquial Hindi, that औरों का पैसा और अपनी अकल हमेशा ज़्यादा लगती है. So all of us think that we know best, and we can think on behalf of everybody else. So I think if we can not succumb to this temptation, we'll be doing everybody a favor. I look forward, and Professor Ramesh Chand is here. I look forward to, I think, more intensive discussions on the policy recommendations so that hard, tangible, concrete plans of action are made with clear allocation of resources and clear timelines, so that we know whether things are doable or not. I'm sure some of the recommendations probably may turn out to be not doable. It's quite possible, and I think all of us realize that, but at least the ones that can be done, if we have more concrete things to work with, I'm sure all the practitioners and the policy makers and the academicians of the country will not let us down. So thank you very much, and thank you once again, FAO and NITI Aayog, for organizing such a wonderful session and for bringing out this wonderful book. This is not the culmination. I began by saying that this is culmination of more than 2 years of hard work. This is just the beginning. So thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. And we did invite several ladies to be part of the panel, but unfortunately they couldn't make it. So thank you to the 4 gentlemen. And this is where we come to the end of this panel discussion, which is also a cue to my colleagues who are doing the live cast, that the live cast now concludes. Thank you for joining us, those of you who are online with us currently. To all of you in the room, one of our responsibilities is, while the dialogue for Indian agriculture towards 2030 will continue, but our pleasant responsibility is to ensure that you reach the dinner before it is 20-30 hours. So please join us outside, and thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.